Here's
Austin. The Shining, I believe, was not only the first Stephen King book I had completely read, but I think it was also my introduction to his movies as well. And I'm actually talking about the miniseries, not the Stanley Kubrick film. I know that's weird that that was the first one I saw, but like I remember those bushes traumatizing me as a child. Like the hedge animals, like apparently, according to my mom, they used to make me cry. But anyway, let's just get into what started it all, the book. Honestly, I think this is still my favorite Stephen King novel, even though it was also the first. Excuse me. Okay, she might not bark if she's in the room. Anyway, I think this is still my favorite Stephen King novel, even though it was the first one I ever read. Keep in mind, I've only read a few. Pet Sematary and It, and I'm currently reading Doctor Sleep. Don't get me wrong, I really like those other books. Like, Pet Sematary is, like, so deliciously dark, and It, like, I'm kind of obsessed with the lore of It right now. I don't know if it's just the hype of the movies coming out, and the fact that I also just read the book to that. You know, they're great, but something about The Shining, I couldn't take my eyes off the page. And I actually did read the book this time, not just listening to the audiobook. It was just it was my first taste of how thrilling and, like, immersive Stephen King stories truly are. So, it stuck with me. I think I might go into a little bit of spoiler territory. I might compare a little bit to the books and movies. Now, this isn't going to be a complete breakdown of the whole story and a complete list of every single difference between the book and the movie, but if you want to skip any of that, go to the time here. So, there's this guy named Jack. He's a recovering alcoholic and a family man. After he loses his job as a teacher, he lands a gig being the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel in Colorado during its off-season. You know, it's like high on a mountain. The winters, it's really rough there. Nobody can even go. Kind of a crappy location. He takes his son, Danny, and his wife, Wendy. Now, Danny is a special kid. He's got, like, these psychic abilities called The Shining. Roll credits. He's shown visions by his imaginary friend, Tony. They're basically, like, warnings of the hotel. He doesn't quite fully understand what they mean, but he knows enough to be scared. When they get to the hotel, they're given a tour, and during the tour, Danny immediately starts seeing some of the ghosts of the past. Excuse me. Meanwhile, Jack is shown a boiler, which he is told that he needs to tend to kind of frequently, or else there could be, like, disastrous consequences. Towards the end of the tour, Danny meets this guy named Dick Halloran. He's the cook of the hotel. He kind of tells Danny, like, he can talk to him through his head. He's got a little bit of The Shining, too. Actually, Dick was in the It book during the whole black spot fiasco. You can tell he's got a little bit of The Shining in that, even. But Danny kind of tells him that he's scared of the hotel, and Dick tells him, listen, the hotel is not dangerous. I worked here for years. You might see some scary images every now and then, but that's all they are. They're just images, like pictures in a book. But Dick tells him if Danny ever needs him to just yell for him with his mind, and Dick will come. During their time at the hotel, Jack has been trying to write this play that he's been working on for a while, but he discovers, like, this box full of documents about the hotel's history and decides that he'd rather write about that. In fact, he kind of becomes obsessed with the whole idea. Meanwhile, Danny is just, like, being tormented by these ghosts, and even though Dick told him that they are just scary pictures in a book, basically, they're not. He gets strangled by a dead girl in room 217 at one point. It even leaves bruises on his neck, and that, along with Jack's previous alcoholism and his somewhat abusive past. He had broke Danny's arm before. A lot of tension rises in the family. But what's going on here is the hotel, the Overlook, it actually wants to eat Danny's Shining. And Jack has a little bit of Shining himself. Not nearly as much as Danny, but, enough for where the Overlook can, like, kind of influence him, kind of, like, guide him in the right direction of what it wants him to do. The hotel ends up using the ghost of Lloyd Grady, who is the Overlook's previous caretaker, and he also murdered his family with an axe. Anyway, he kind of shows up to Jack as like a bartender, and he tempts him to drink again. Once Jack starts drinking again, he's much more susceptible to what the hotel wants him to do. And Grady ends up convincing him that in order to become the hotel's new manager, he's got to kill his family. So, while Jack is off to accomplish these newfound goals, Danny decides that, like, you know, it's probably a good idea to call Dick in for help, because he can tell something's up with his dad. Jack has broken the radio and stuff. He's begun lashing out his... Like, you know, you can tell, like, this normal guy is becoming, like, way worse, like something else entirely. Dick finally arrives during the kind of the climax of the thing, and he and Wendy are both brutally beaten by Jack and his like croquet mallet. And as Jack is about to bash Danny's brains in, Danny reminds his dad that he forgot about the boiler. And so Jack's like, during a moment of clarity, Jack tells Danny that he loves him and to get out while he still can, and Jack goes to try to tend to the boiler. He fails, however. The Overlook explodes with Jack inside, but Danny, Dick, and Wendy all make it out alive, and Jack is remembered as a hero. Here's a couple differences that I jotted down between the book and the movie. Again, this isn't a complete list. I'm sure there's way more. These are just the ones that stood out to me. In the book, Jack uses, like I said, like a croquet mallet, and in the movie, he uses an axe. Personally, than an axe. I feel like the axe, you just die a little quicker. I don't know. I just don't want my brains bashed in. Please don't do that. In the book, there are the hedge animals, and in the Stanley Kubrick movie, there is no hedge animals. There is instead a maze. But in the book, the hedge animals, they kind of act as like a guardian to the hotel. And they move, just not when you're looking at them. You know, like mannequins. Like every mannequin in real life. In the movie, Danny gets strangled in room 237 instead of room 217. And also, the twins that are really popular from the movie, they're not really in the book at all. Instead, there's this one really creepy part, like the creepiest part in the whole book to me, was when Danny was playing in the playground by himself, and like he hears like the ghost of a kid from the tunnel. He doesn't really even see him. He doesn't get a good look at him at all, but like he's calling from the tunnel. He wants to play with, I don't know, something about that gave me the chills. Maybe I'm just a big old baby. Tony is visible in the book and invisible in the movie. In the book, he's always like, so far, you can barely see him. I also think he's supposed to represent like an older Danny. And also, Wendy is a lot more independent in the book. The Overlook is a lot more active. And, you know, they actually talk about in the book about how the Overlook wants to eat Danny Shining. But in the movie, they don't really mention that at all. They also don't mention Jack Torrance's little bit of the Shining in the movie at all. Jack is way more complex in the book. You get a lot more of his history. He starts off in the book being like a normal but flawed man, but he's trying the best he can. He could try, I guess, a little bit better, but he wants to do good. And by the end of it, he's like, the hotel has just such a grip on him. He's completely changed. He's basically a monster. Whereas in the movie, the Stanley Kubrick movie, he dies a monster. He doesn't have that moment of redemption where he tells Danny that he loves him at the end, and then of course the biggest difference is, in the book, the Overlook explodes, and in the movie, the Overlook is still standing by the end of it all. But it's a great book. It really is. One of my all-time favorites. In the end, I gotta give it like a 9 out of 10. I'm not even sure what a 10 out of 10 would be. This is just like the closest I got. I'm reserving that spot for something that just like, I don't know. I'm just reserving that spot. And honestly, I wish I could give it and Pet Sematary a higher rating, like an 8 out of 10 instead of the 7 out of 10 I gave them, but whatevs, can't change the past. Anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it a lot. If you want to, keep an eye out for my review of Dr. Sleep, which is coming out next. I'll get that out as soon as possible. Again, thanks, and have a good one.